My name is Hattie Williams, and I'm 69 years old. Yesterday afternoon, my son Marshall forced me to sign papers transferring my house, the house I'd owned for 40 years, into his name. Not asked, not convinced, forced. Marshall stood over me at my kitchen table, his hand gripping my wrist so tightly it hurt, holding a pen, pushing my hand toward the signature line on a deed transfer document. "Sign it, Mama," Marshall said, his voice cold and threatening. "Just sign it and this will be over." "Marshall, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "This is my house. I bought it with your father. I've lived here for 40 years. Please don't do this." "I said sign it," Marshall shouted, squeezing my wrist harder until I cried out in pain. With my left hand shaking and my right hand controlled by Marshall's grip, I signed my name on the document. Marshall released my wrist, grabbed the papers, and smiled. Not a kind smile, but a victorious, cruel smile. "There," Marshall said. "Now this house is mine, legally mine. You can stay here for now if you behave, but don't forget I own this place now. You live here because I allow it." Then Marshall walked out of my house. His house now, according to that forced signature, leaving me sitting at my kitchen table crying, rubbing my bruised wrist, feeling like I'd lost everything. But Marshall was wrong about one thing. That evening, I signed one paper, a different paper, one Marshall knew nothing about, that would take everything back, expose the truth, and reclaim my peace. But to understand how my own son could do this to me, how a boy I'd raised alone became a man who would steal his mother's home by force, I need to take you back to the beginning. I had Marshall when I was 21 years old, in 1977. His father was George Williams, a man I'd married at 19. George and I struggled financially those first few years. He worked construction, I worked as a cashier at a grocery store. Money was always tight. When Marshall was 3 years old, George was killed in a construction accident. A scaffold collapsed, and George fell 3 stories. He died instantly. I was 24 years old, suddenly a widow with a 3-year-old son and no life insurance because we couldn't afford it. "I'll take care of us," I promised Marshall at George's funeral, holding my crying toddler. "I'll work hard and give you everything you need." And I did. For the next 45 years, I worked hard and gave Marshall everything. I got a better job at a bank as a teller. I worked overtime whenever I could. I scraped and saved every penny. When Marshall was 10, I saved enough for a down payment on a small house, the house I would own for 40 years, the house Marshall would eventually steal from me. "This is our house, baby," I told Marshall the day we moved in. "Your daddy would be so proud. We own a home." Marshall seemed happy then. He was a good kid, or so I thought. The first signs of Marshall's entitlement appeared when he was 14. "Mama, I need $100, Marshall announced one day. "For what?" I asked. "New shoes," Marshall said. "All the guys at school have them." "Baby, I just bought you shoes 3 months ago," I pointed out. "Those are fine." "I'm not wearing those," Marshall said dismissively. "I need the new ones. Give me $100. "Marshall, I don't have an extra $100 right now," I explained. "Maybe for your birthday." "Forget it," Marshall said angrily. "You never give me what I need." Never give him what he needs. I'd been giving him everything for 14 years. But I felt guilty, so I picked up extra shifts and bought Marshall the shoes. That pattern continued throughout his teenage years. Marshall would demand something. I'd explain I couldn't afford it. He'd get angry and accuse me of not caring about him, and I'd feel guilty and find a way to give it to him. Looking back, I see I was teaching Marshall that if he made me feel guilty enough, I'd give him whatever he wanted. Marshall graduated high school at 18 and went to community college. I paid his tuition, books, and gave him spending money. "I need a car," Marshall announced when he was 19. "Baby, I can't afford to buy you a car," I said. "But if you get a part-time job, I can help with insurance." "A job," Marshall repeated with disgust. "I'm in school full-time. I don't have time for a job." "Lots of students work part-time," I pointed out. Well, I'm not lots of students, Marshall said. I'm your son, and you should want to help me. I ended up taking out a small loan to buy Marshall a used car. I paid the loan for 2 years while Marshall drove the car and contributed nothing. When Marshall was 22, he dropped out of community college after 4 years without getting a degree. College isn't for me, Marshall announced. I'm going to start a business. What kind of business? I asked. I'm still figuring that out, Marshall said vaguely, but I'll need some money to get started. How much? I asked nervously. $5,000, Marshall said casually, like it was nothing. Marshall, I don't have $5,000, I said, shocked. Yes, you do, Marshall said. You have equity in this house. Take out a home equity loan. A loan against my house, I repeated. Baby, that's risky. So you won't help me, Marshall accused. Your own son is trying to build a future and you won't support him. It's not that I won't help, I said, but $5,000 is a lot of money. Forget it, Marshall said coldly. I'll remember this when you're old and need help from me. That threat worked. I was terrified of being alone in my old age with no family to help me. So I took out a $5,000 home equity loan and gave Marshall the money. Marshall's business never materialized. I never found out what he spent the money on, and I spent the next 5 years paying back that loan. For the next 25 years, the pattern continued. Marshall would demand money or help. I'd hesitate. He'd make me feel guilty or threaten to cut me off, and I'd give in. Marshall lived with me on and off throughout his 20s and 30s. Every time he moved out, he'd lose his apartment within a year and move back in. Just temporarily, Marshall would always say, just until I get on my feet. But temporary would turn into months or years. Marshall worked sporadically. He'd get a job, keep it for a few months, then quit or get fired. The boss was an idiot, Marshall would explain. My coworkers were lazy, he'd claim. The job was beneath me, he'd justify. It was never Marshall's fault, always someone else's. When Marshall was 35, he announced he was moving to another state for a great opportunity. What's the opportunity? I asked. A business partner wants to open a restaurant with me, Marshall explained. Do you have restaurant experience? I asked. I'll learn, Marshall said confidently. Do you have money to invest? I asked. That's why I'm telling you, Marshall said. I need $10,000. Marshall, I'm 61 years old, I said. I'm getting close to retirement. I can't afford to give you $10,000. It's not giving, Marshall corrected. It's investing. I'll pay you back with interest. You've never paid me back before, I pointed out. This is different, Marshall insisted. This is a real business opportunity. Against my better judgment, I took out another home equity loan and gave Marshall $10,000. Marshall moved to another state. The restaurant never happened. I never saw that money again. And I spent another 7 years paying off that loan. 2 years ago, when I was 67 and Marshall was 46, Marshall returned to live with me again. The economy is terrible, Marshall explained. I can't find decent work. I need to stay with you for a while. How long? I asked. A few months, Marshall promised. 2 years later, Marshall was still living in my house. And his behavior had gotten worse. More demanding, more entitled, more aggressive. Mama, I need money, became a daily request. Mama, go to the store and get me, became a constant command. Mama, why isn't dinner ready? Became an evening complaint. I'd gone from being Marshall's mother to being his servant. And the worst part, Marshall started talking about my house like it was his. I'm thinking about painting MY living room, Marshall would say. I might remodel MY kitchen, he'd mention. When this is fully mine, I'm going to, he'd start sentences. Marshall, this is MY house, I'd correct him. I own it. For now, Marshall would say with a strange smile. But you're getting old, Mama. Someday this will be mine anyway. That comment always made me uncomfortable, but I told myself Marshall just meant inheritance. That someday when I died, the house would go to him. I didn't realize Marshall had no intention of waiting for me to die. 6 months ago, Marshall started pressuring me about the house more directly. "Mama, you should put the house in my name," Marshall said one day. "Why would I do that?" I asked. "For tax purposes," Marshall said vaguely, "and to avoid probate when you die." "Marshall, I'm 69, not dying," I said. "I plan to live in this house for many more years." "But what if something happens to you?" Marshall pressed. "What if you get sick? What if you need nursing home care? If the house is in your name, the government can take it to pay for your care." "That's not how it works," I started. "Yes, it is," Marshall interrupted. "I've been researching. If you transfer the house to me now, it's protected. You can still live here, but it'll be legally mine so the government can't touch it." "I don't know, Marshall," I said hesitantly. "Don't you trust me?" Marshall asked. "I'm your son. Who else are you going to leave it to?" "It's not about trust." "It sounds like it's about trust," Marshall said coldly. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me," I repeated, shocked. "Marshall, I've supported you for 48 years. I've given you money, housing, everything." "And I've been here for you," Marshall said. "Keeping you company, making sure you're not alone, that's worth something." I didn't pursue the argument, but I also didn't agree to transfer the house. Marshall didn't bring it up again for a few weeks. I thought he'd dropped it. I was wrong. 3 months ago, Marshall started bringing home papers for me to sign. "What are these?" I asked when Marshall set documents in front of me at the kitchen table. "Just some paperwork to update your estate planning," Marshall said casually. "I don't have estate planning," I pointed out. "Exactly," Marshall said. "That's why we need to set it up. These papers make me your power of attorney and transfer the house into a living trust with me as trustee." "Marshall, I don't understand all this legal language," I said, looking at the complex documents. "You don't need to understand it," Marshall said. "Just trust me, I'm protecting you." "I want to have a lawyer look at this first," I said. Marshall's face darkened with anger. "A lawyer? You need a lawyer to trust your own son." "It's not about trust." "It's always about trust with you," Marshall shouted. "I try to help you and you act like I'm trying to cheat you." "I didn't say that." "You implied it," Marshall said. "Fine, don't sign. But when you end up sick and alone in a nursing home with the government taking everything, don't come crying to me." Marshall stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. He didn't come back for 2 days. When he returned, he acted like nothing had happened and didn't mention the papers again. But I noticed the papers had disappeared from where I'd left them on the counter. 1 month ago, Marshall's behavior escalated from pressure to intimidation. "Mama, we need to talk about the house situation," Marshall said one evening. "There is no house situation," I said. "This is my house." "That's the problem," Marshall said. "You're being stubborn about this. I need you to put the house in my name." "Why do you need that?" I asked. "Because I have plans," Marshall said vaguely. "Business opportunities that require me to have property in my name." "Then buy your own property," I suggested. "With what money?" Marshall asked. "You know I don't have money." "Then get a job and save," I said. "I'm 48 years old," Marshall exploded. "I'm not starting over at some minimum wage job. I deserve better than that." "Deserve?" I repeated. "Marshall, you haven't worked consistently in years. You live in my house rent-free. You contribute nothing. And now you want me to give you my house." "Not give," Marshall said. "Transfer for legal protection." "No," I said firmly. "This is my house. I'm not transferring it to you." Marshall stood up abruptly. He was a big man, 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds. Standing over me where I sat at the kitchen table, he looked intimidating. "You're making a mistake," Marshall said, his voice low and threatening. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm warning you," Marshall said. "There are ways to make this happen with or without your cooperation." "What does that mean?" I asked. Marshall didn't answer. He just walked away, leaving me sitting there frightened and confused. 2 weeks ago, I made a disturbing discovery. I was looking for my property tax bill in my desk drawer and found documents I didn't recognize. Legal papers with my name on them. I pulled them out and started reading. My blood ran cold. They were quit-claim deed documents, papers that would transfer ownership of my house from me to Marshall. And they had my signature on them. But I'd never signed these papers. I'd refused to sign anything Marshall brought me. Which meant Marshall had forged my signature. I looked closer at the signature. It was close to mine, but not quite right. The H in Hattie was slightly different. The loop in the W of Williams was too big. Marshall had practiced my signature and forged these documents. Fortunately, the documents were still in my desk, which meant Marshall hadn't filed them yet. They weren't legal until recorded with the county. But clearly, Marshall was planning to file them. He was planning to steal my house through forgery. I hid the documents in a different location, under my mattress, and tried to figure out what to do. Should I confront Marshall, call the police, talk to a lawyer? I was scared. Marshall had become aggressive, intimidating. What would he do if he knew I'd found the forged documents? Yesterday afternoon, my worst fears came true. Marshall came into my bedroom, where I was folding laundry. "Where are the papers, Mama?" Marshall asked. "What papers?" I asked, my heart racing. "The deed transfer papers that were in your desk," Marshall said. "They're gone. Where did you put them?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. "Yes, you do," Marshall said. "I know you found them. Where are they?" "Marshall, those papers are forgeries," I said, deciding confrontation was unavoidable. "You forged my signature. That's illegal." "I did what I had to do since you won't be reasonable," Marshall said. "Stealing my house is reasonable," I asked incredulously. "It's not stealing if it should be mine anyway," Marshall justified. "It's not yours," I said. "It's MY house." "Not for long," Marshall said. "Now give me those papers." "No," I said. "I'm going to a lawyer. I'm reporting you for forgery." That's when Marshall grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the kitchen. "You're not going to any lawyer," Marshall said. "You're going to sign new papers, right now, and this time I'm going to watch you do it." Marshall forced me into a kitchen chair. He pulled out fresh deed transfer documents from his bagged documents he must have had prepared as backups. "Sign them," Marshall ordered. "No," I said. Marshall grabbed my wrist and squeezed. Hard. Pain shot up my arm. "I said sign them," Marshall shouted. "You're hurting me," I cried. "Then sign and I'll let go," Marshall said. With Marshall gripping my wrist, controlling my hand, forcing the pen into my fingers, pushing my hand toward the signature line, I had no choice. I signed. Marshall released me, grabbed the papers, and smiled that cruel, victorious smile. "There, now this house is mine, legally mine. You can stay here for now if you behave, but don't forget I own this place now. You live here because I allow it." Then Marshall left to file the papers immediately at the county recorder's office. I sat at my kitchen table, crying, rubbing my bruised wrist, feeling like I'd lost everything. But that evening, I made a phone call that would change everything. And I signed one paper, a different paper, one Marshall knew nothing about, that would take everything back, expose his crime, and reclaim my peace. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Hit that like button and turn on NOTIFICTONS. Drop a comment, should Hattie press charges? What would you do in her situation? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia? Let me know. That evening, after Marshall left to file the forged deed documents at the county recorder's office, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my bruised wrist, and made a decision. I wasn't going to accept this. I wasn't going to let Marshall steal 40 years of my life, the house I'd worked so hard to buy, the home I'd raised him in. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called the one person I knew could help me, Opal Mitchell, an attorney I'd worked with years ago when I was a bank teller. We'd stayed in touch over the decades, having coffee occasionally, and I knew she specialized in elder law. Opal, it's Hattie Williams, I said when she answered. I need help. My son just stole my house. What do you mean, stole your house? Opal asked, her voice immediately alert. I told her everything. The months of pressure. The forged documents I'd found. Marshall forcing me to sign new documents today while gripping my wrist so hard it bruised. Hattie, that's coercion and elder abuse, Opal said firmly. And if he forged your signature on the first set of documents, that's fraud and forgery. Where is Marshall now? He left to file the papers at the county recorder's office, I said. He said the house is legally his now. Not if we act fast, Opal said. Hattie, can you come to my office right now? We need to file emergency legal documents tonight to block this transfer. Right now, I asked nervously. What if Marshall comes back? Call a neighbor or friend to stay with you while you gather what you need, Opal advised. Bring any documents you have, the forged papers if you still have them, bank statements, anything showing the house is yours. And Hattie, take photos of your wrist where he grabbed you. We need evidence of the force he used. Okay, I said, my voice steadying with purpose. I'll be there in an hour. I called my neighbor Letty Johnson, who'd lived next door for 15 years. She'd heard Marshall yelling at me many times over the past 2 years. Letty, can you come over? I asked. I need help with something urgent. Letty arrived within 5 minutes. When I showed her my bruised wrist and explained what Marshall had done, her face filled with fury. That boy needs to be in jail, Letty said. I've been telling you for 2 years he's no good. What can I do to help? Stay here while I gather documents, I said. I'm going to a lawyer. If Marshall comes back, tell him I went to the store. I'll tell him nothing, Letty said firmly. And if he tries to come in this house, I'm calling the police. With Letty standing guard, I gathered everything I needed. The original forged quitclaim deed documents I'd found in my desk, still hidden under my mattress. My property deed showing I'd owned the house for 40 years. My mortgage payoff statement from 10 years ago showing the house was fully paid off. Bank statements showing all the money I'd given Marshall over the years. Photos I took with my phone of my bruised wrist. The home equity loan documents showing I'd borrowed money to give to Marshall. I put everything in a folder and headed to Opal's law office. Opal's office was in a downtown building. I arrived at 7 p.m., shaking but determined. Hattie, let me see your wrist, Opal said immediately. I showed her the dark purple bruises forming where Marshall had gripped me. Did he twist your wrist or just squeeze? Opal asked, taking photos with her phone. He squeezed very hard and pulled me by my arm to the kitchen, I explained. That's assault and battery in addition to coercion, Opal said. Now show me the documents. I spread everything on Opal's conference table. She examined each item carefully, her expression growing more serious with each document. This is clear-cut elder abuse and financial exploitation, Opal said, looking at the forged quitclaim deeds. The signature doesn't even match yours well, and the document you signed today under duress is legally void because you signed under physical force. But Marshall filed it at the county recorder's office, I said. Doesn't that make it legal? Not if we challenge it immediately, Opal explained. We're going to file 3 things tonight before the county office closes tomorrow morning. Opal pulled up documents on her computer and started typing rapidly. First, Opal explained as she worked, we're filing an emergency petition to void the deed transfer based on coercion, duress, and lack of mental capacity. Mental capacity, I repeated. There's nothing wrong with my mind. I know, Opal said. But we're going to argue that Marshall created a situation of extreme emotional distress and physical force that prevented you from making a voluntary decision. That's legally similar to lack of capacity in the moment. Second, Opal continued, we're filing a lease pendens. That's a notice that there's a legal dispute over the property. It prevents Marshall from selling or mortgaging the house while the case is pending. And third, Opal said, we're filing for an emergency restraining order requiring Marshall to stay away from you and the property based on elder abuse. A restraining order, I asked nervously. Against my own son. Hattie, your son physically forced you to sign away your house, Opal said firmly. That's abuse. He's a danger to you. The restraining order will protect you while we fight the deed transfer. What do I need to sign? I asked. Opal printed several documents and walked me through each one. 1. A sworn affidavit describing Marshall's coercion and force. 2. A petition to void the fraudulent deed transfer. 3. A lease pendens filing. 4. An emergency restraining order petition. 5. A criminal complaint for elder abuse, assault, and forgery. This last one is optional, Opal said, pointing to the criminal complaint. But I strongly recommend filing it. Marshall committed multiple crimes. He should face consequences. I hesitated. Pressing criminal charges against my own son felt enormous. I know it's hard, Opal said gently. But Hattie, if you don't hold him accountable, what's to stop him from trying this again, or doing it to someone else? She was right. I signed all 5 documents. What happens now? I asked. I'm filing these electronically with the court tonight, Opal explained. The lease pendens will be recorded with the county first thing tomorrow morning, before Marshall's deed transfer gets processed. That means even if his fraudulent deed gets recorded, there will immediately be a legal cloud on the title preventing him from doing anything with the property. And then, I asked. Then we go to court for an emergency hearing, probably within 48 hours, Opal said. We'll present evidence that the deed transfer was obtained through force and fraud. The judge will likely void it immediately and grant the restraining order. Will Marshall go to jail? I asked. That depends on whether the district attorney decides to prosecute based on your criminal complaint, Opal said. But at minimum, he'll be served with a restraining order requiring him to stay away from you and move out of your house. I felt both relief and fear. Relief that I was fighting back, fear of how Marshall would react. I returned home at 9 p.m. Letty was still there, sitting in my living room knitting. Did you do it? Letty asked. I did, I confirmed. I filed legal papers to get my house back and get a restraining order against Marshall. Good, Letty said with satisfaction. That boy has had this coming for years. He's going to be so angry, I said nervously. Let him be angry from somewhere else, Letty said. Is he here now? I don't think so, I said, looking around. Marshall's car wasn't in the driveway. I'm staying with you tonight, Letty announced. I already called my husband and told him, you're not facing Marshall alone when he comes back. You don't have to, I started. I'm staying, Letty said firmly. End of discussion. I was grateful. Having Letty there made me feel safer. Marshall didn't come home that night. I didn't sleep much anyway, listening for his car, wondering what would happen when the court documents were served. At 8 a.m. the next morning, Opal called. Hattie, good news, Opal said. The lease pendens was recorded at the county recorder's office at 7:30. Marshall's fraudulent deed was recorded at 7:45 a.m. But because our lease pendens was recorded first, his deed is now legally clouded. He can't sell, mortgage, or transfer the property. So the house is still mine, I asked hopefully. Technically, the county records show Marshall as the owner based on his fraudulent deed, Opal explained. But our lease pendens makes that ownership legally disputed. No title company would ensure a sale. No bank would give him a mortgage. The property is essentially frozen until the court rules. When is the court hearing? I asked. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Opal said. Emergency hearing before Judge Geneva Hayes. Marshall will be served with notice of the hearing today along with the restraining order petition. He's going to come here, I said, fear creeping into my voice. If he does, call 911 immediately, Opal instructed. The restraining order petition includes a stay-away order effective immediately upon service. If he comes to your house after being served, that's a violation and he'll be arrested. Okay, I said, my hands shaking. At noon, Marshall's car pulled into the driveway. Letty and I were in the living room. We both tensed. Marshall walked through the front door. He still had his key, carrying what looked like bank documents. Mama, I need you to sign more papers, Marshall announced, walking into the living room. Then he saw Letty and stopped. What's she doing here? I'm here to make sure you don't hurt Hattie again, Letty said firmly. Hurt her, Marshall repeated with fake confusion. I didn't hurt anyone. Your mother has bruises on her wrist from where you grabbed her yesterday, Letty said. That was an accident, Marshall claimed. I was helping her sign papers and I held her hand to steady it. You forced her to sign away her house, Letty said, standing up. This is between me and my mother, Marshall said coldly. You need to leave. I'm not leaving, Letty said. Marshall turned to me. Mama, tell her to leave. We need to discuss business. I want Letty to stay, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Fine, Marshall said irritably. Then we'll talk with an audience. Mama, I went to the bank this morning to apply for a home equity loan on MY house. It's not your house, I interrupted. Actually, it is, Marshall said smugly. I have the recorded deed right here. He pulled out a document from his folder. See, recorded yesterday at the county recorder's office. This house is legally in my name. Not for long, I said quietly. What does that mean? Marshall asked suspiciously. It means I filed legal papers last night to void that fraudulent deed, I said, my courage growing. The court recognized that you forced me to sign it through physical coercion. There's a legal cloud on the title now. You can't sell or mortgage the property. Marshall's face went from confusion to shock to rage in seconds. You did what? Marshall shouted. I filed papers to take my house back, I said, and I filed for a restraining order against you for elder abuse. Elder abuse, Marshall exploded. I'm your son, I was trying to help you. By forging my signature, I challenged. By forcing me to sign papers while squeezing my wrist so hard you left bruises. I didn't forge anything, Marshall lied, and I didn't hurt you. I have the forged documents, I said. The ones you hid in my desk, the ones with the fake signature that doesn't match mine, and I have photos of my bruises. Marshall's face went pale. He hadn't realized I'd found the forged documents. Where are those papers? Marshall demanded. With my lawyer, I said, along with evidence of all the money I've given you over the years, all the times I took out loans to support you, all the documentation showing this house has been mine for 40 years. A knock at the door interrupted our confrontation. Marshall and I both turned. Through the window, I could see two people in uniforms, a sheriff's deputy and a process server. They were here to serve Marshall with the court documents. I opened the door. The sheriff's deputy spoke first. I'm looking for Marshall Williams, the deputy said. That's me, Marshall said, walking to the door. Mr. Williams, you're being served with legal documents, the deputy said, handing Marshall a thick envelope. Marshall ripped open the envelope and started reading. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, disbelief, fury. This is a restraining order, Marshall shouted. She can't get a restraining order against me. I'm her son. Sir, the order is effective immediately, the deputy explained. You're required to stay at least 500 feet away from Mrs. Williams and this property. You have 30 minutes to collect essential belongings. After that, if you return to this property, you'll be arrested. This is MY property, Marshall insisted, waving the recorded deed. I own this house. Sir, there's a lease pendens on the property, the deputy said. The ownership is legally disputed. Regardless of what the deed says, the court has issued a temporary restraining order. You need to comply. I'm not going anywhere, Marshall said defiantly. Then I'll arrest you right now for violating a court order, the deputy said, hand moving toward his handcuffs. Marshall looked between me, the deputy, and the court papers, clearly calculating whether he could talk or intimidate his way out of this. He couldn't. Fine, Marshall said bitterly. I'll get my stuff, but this isn't over, Mama. I'm fighting this. That house is mine. I worked too hard to get it to let you take it back. You didn't work for it, I said quietly but firmly. You stole it, and I'm taking it back. For the next 30 minutes, Marshall packed clothes and personal items while the sheriff's deputy supervised. Marshall tried several times to take things that weren't his. My TV, kitchen appliances, furniture. "That's not yours," I said each time. "I bought it," Marshall lied. "No, you didn't," I corrected. "I have receipts proving I bought everything in this house." "Did you really keep receipts for everything?" Marshall asked incredulously. "For 40 years," I confirmed. "Every major purchase, because I'm organized and responsible, unlike some people." Marshall's face reddened with rage, but he couldn't argue. The deputy wouldn't let him take anything I claimed. After 30 minutes, Marshall had 3 suitcases and some boxes. "Where am I supposed to go?" Marshall demanded. "That's not my problem," I said, words I never thought I'd say to my son. "I can't believe you're doing this," Marshall said. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Marshall, you've done nothing for me. I've done everything for you for 48 years. I worked multiple jobs to support you. I gave you money I didn't have. I let you live here rent-free for years. And you repaid me by stealing my house." "I didn't steal it," Marshall insisted. "You signed it over to me." "Because you forced me," I said. "While squeezing my wrist so hard you bruised it. That's not a legal transfer. That's robbery." "The court will see it my way," Marshall said confidently. "I'm your only child. Of course you'd transfer your house to me. The court will understand." "The court will see the forged documents," I said, "and the photos of my bruises, and hear about 48 years of you taking advantage of me, and they'll give me my house back." "We'll see," Marshall said coldly. The deputy escorted Marshall to his car. Marshall loaded his belongings, got in, and drove away without a backward glance. And just like that, after 2 years of living with Marshall's demands and abuse, my house was peaceful again. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Smash that like button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Is Hattie doing the right thing? Should Marshall go to jail? Where are you watching from? The next afternoon, I sat in the courtroom waiting for the emergency hearing, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Opal sat beside me at the petitioner's table, organizing documents. Across the aisle, Marshall sat with a court-appointed attorney named Grover Thompson, who'd been assigned that morning since Marshall couldn't afford to hire his own lawyer. Marshall kept glaring at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He clearly couldn't believe his mother, his quiet, compliant mother who'd given him everything for 48 years, was actually fighting him in court. But I was done being quiet, done being compliant, done letting Marshall take advantage of me. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Geneva Hayes presiding." Judge Hayes was a black woman in her early 60s with silver-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. She took her seat at the bench and reviewed the case file. "This is an emergency petition to void a property deed transfer," Judge Hayes said, looking up. "Mrs. Williams, you claim your son coerced you into signing over your house. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing up nervously. "And Mr. Williams, you claim the transfer was voluntary," Judge Hayes asked Marshall. "Yes, Your Honor," Marshall said, standing. "My mother is elderly. She gets confused. She asked me to help manage her property and freely transferred the house to me." "I'm not confused," I said indignantly. "Mrs. Williams, you'll have your chance to speak," Judge Hayes said. "Let's proceed with opening statements. Mrs. Mitchell." Opal stood and addressed the court with calm authority. "Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of elder abuse and property theft," Opal began. "For 6 months, Marshall Williams pressured his 69-year-old mother to transfer her house, a house she's owned for 40 years, into his name. When Mrs. Williams refused repeatedly, Mr. Williams forged her signature on quit-claim deed documents," Opal continued, holding up the forged papers. "When Mrs. Williams discovered the forgery, Mr. Williams escalated to physical force." Opal clicked a remote, and photos appeared on the courtroom's screen. My bruised wrist, dark purple marks where Marshall had gripped me. "These injuries were inflicted by Mr. Williams yesterday when he physically grabbed his mother's wrist," forced a pen into her hand, and coerced her to sign new deed transfer documents, Opal explained. This wasn't a voluntary transfer. This was robbery. Additionally, Opal said, Mrs. Williams has documentation showing that for 48 years, she's financially supported her son. She's given him over $15,000 in direct cash gifts, taken out home equity loans to fund his failed business ventures, and allowed him to live rent-free in her home for extended periods. Mr. Williams has taken advantage of his mother's generosity for decades, Opal concluded. And when she finally tried to protect her assets, he responded with forgery and force. We're asking the court to void the fraudulent deed transfer, make the restraining order permanent, and refer this matter for criminal prosecution. Judge Hayes nodded, making notes. Mr. Thompson, your opening statement. Grover Thompson stood, looking uncomfortable. He'd clearly reviewed the evidence and knew he had a weak case. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that the property transfer may have appeared rushed, Grover began carefully. However, Mrs. Williams is 69 years old. She lives alone. She's been expressing concerns about her ability to manage property as she ages. My client was trying to help his mother by taking over property management responsibilities, Grover continued. The transfer was intended to protect Mrs. Williams, not harm her. As for the alleged force, Grover said, gesturing to the photos, my client may have helped steady his mother's hand while she signed the documents. Mrs. Williams has arthritis and sometimes needs physical assistance with writing. What appears as force was actually assistance. I nearly stood up to object. I don't have arthritis. But Opal put a hand on my arm, signaling me to wait. Your Honor, my client is willing to discuss a compromise, Grover concluded. Perhaps Mrs. Williams can retain life estate rights while the property is held in trust with my client as trustee. This would protect both parties' interests. No, I said loudly, unable to contain myself. Mrs. Williams, you'll have your turn, Judge Hayes said, but I could see a slight smile at my outburst. Let's hear testimony. Mrs. Williams, please take the stand. I sat in the witness box, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Opal walked me through my testimony methodically. Mrs. Williams, how long have you owned the property at 847 Maple Street? Opal asked. 40 years, I said. I bought it in 1985 when my son Marshall was 10 years old. Did you buy it with your son? Opal asked. No, I said. I bought it alone after my husband died. I worked as a bank teller and saved for years to afford the down payment. When did you pay off the mortgage? Opal asked. 15 years ago, I said. In 2010, the house has been fully paid off and in my name alone ever since. Has Marshall ever contributed financially to the house? Opal asked. No, I said. He's never paid rent, utilities, property taxes, or repairs. I've paid for everything. Mrs. Williams, tell the court about the events of 2 days ago, Opal prompted. I took a deep breath and described everything. Finding the forged documents, Marshall demanding I sign new papers, his hand gripping my wrist, the pain, the fear, signing because I had no choice. After you signed, what did Marshall say? Opal asked. He said, now this house is mine, legally mine. You can stay here for now if you behave, but don't forget I own this place now. You live here because I allow it, I recited, the words burned into my memory. How did that make you feel? Opal asked. Terrified, I admitted, and heartbroken. I realized my son didn't see me as his mother. He saw me as an obstacle to getting what he wanted. Opal showed me the forged documents. Are these the papers you found in your desk? Yes, I confirmed. Is that your signature? Opal asked. No, I said. It's close, but it's not mine. Marshall forged it. How can you tell? Opal asked. The H in Hattie is different from how I write it, I explained. And the W in Williams has a loop that's too big. I've been signing my name for 69 years. I know what my signature looks like. Opal then showed photos of my bruised wrist. When were these photos taken? The evening of the forced signing, I said. About 2 hours after Marshall grabbed me. Did Marshall intend to hurt you when he grabbed you?" Opal asked. "I don't know if he intended to hurt me," I said honestly. "But he intended to force me to sign. The pain was just a tool to make me comply." Then Grover Thompson cross-examined me. "Mrs. Williams, you claim my client forged your signature," Grover began. "But isn't it possible you simply forgot signing these documents? You're 69 years old. Memory lapses are common." "I didn't forget," I said firmly. "I never signed those papers. Marshall forged my signature." "You live alone, correct?" Grover asked. "Yes," I said. "Isn't it possible you're lonely and your son was trying to help you by managing your property?" Grover suggested. "I'm not lonely," I said. "I have friends, I have neighbors, I have a full life. What I don't have is a son who respects me." "Mrs. Williams, isn't it true that you've given my client money many times over the years?" Grover asked. "Yes," I admitted. $15,000 total according to your lawyer's statement," Grover confirmed. "At least that much," I said. "Probably more." "So you had a pattern of financially supporting my client," Grover said. "Doesn't it make sense that transferring your house to him would be consistent with that pattern?" "No," I said. "Giving my son money when he asked is different from giving him my house. I gave him money because I loved him and wanted to help. He took my house because he's greedy." "Your Honor, I object to the characterization," Grover started. "Overruled," Judge Hayes said. "The witness can describe her son's motivations as she perceived them." "Mrs. Williams, do you have arthritis?" Grover asked, changing tactics. "No," I said. "Do you have any condition that makes it difficult to write?" Grover pressed. "No," I said. "My hands work fine. I write perfectly well on my own." "So when my client steadied your hand during signing," Grover began. "He didn't steady my hand," I interrupted. "He grabbed my wrist, squeezed it hard enough to bruise, and forced my hand to sign while I was crying and begging him to stop." Grover paused, realizing his questions were making things worse for Marshall, not better. "No further questions," Grover said, sitting down. Then Marshall took the stand. Opal cross-examined him with precision. "Mr. Williams, how long have you lived in your mother's house?" Opal asked. "On and off for most of my adult life," Marshall admitted. "Currently, you've been living there for 2 years, correct?" Opal confirmed. "Yes," Marshall said. "During those 2 years, how much rent have you paid?" Opal asked. "We had an arrangement," Marshall started. "How much rent?" Opal repeated. "None," Marshall admitted, "but I help around the house." "What jobs have you held during the past 2 years?" Opal interrupted. "I've been between opportunities," Marshall said evasively. "You've been unemployed for 2 years," Opal clarified. "Yes," Marshall admitted reluctantly. "So for 2 years, you've lived rent-free in your mother's house without contributing financially in any way," Opal summarized. "My mother and I have an understanding," Marshall tried. "Answer yes or no," Opal said firmly. "Yes," Marshall said, his face reddening. "Mr. Williams, 3 months ago, did you bring deed transfer papers to your mother and ask her to sign them?" Opal asked. "I suggested we update her estate planning," Marshall began. "Did you ask her to transfer the house to you?" Opal pressed. "Yes," Marshall said, "for estate planning purposes." "Did she agree to sign?" Opal asked. "She said she wanted to think about it," Marshall said. "She said no," Opal corrected. "And when she said no, what did you do?" "I explained the benefits," Marshall started. "What did you do when she refused to sign?" Opal repeated. Marshall hesitated. "I prepared alternative documents." "You forged her signature on quitclaim deeds," Opal said, holding up the forged papers. "I was trying to help her," Marshall protested. "By committing forgery," Opal challenged. "Mr. Williams, is this your mother's signature?" She showed him the forged documents. "It looks like her signature," Marshall said. "But it's not, is it?" Opal pressed. "You signed her name without her permission." I may have signed for her," Marshall admitted, "but only because she'd verbally agreed." "She'd verbally agreed," Opal repeated skeptically. Then why didn't you have her sign it herself? She was confused, Marshall claimed. Mr. Williams, 2 days ago did you physically grab your mother's wrist? Opal asked. I helped steady her hand, Marshall maintained. Did you squeeze her wrist hard enough to leave bruises? Opal asked, showing the photos again. That was accidental, Marshall said. Did she ask you to stop? Opal pressed. She was emotional, Marshall started. Did she ask you to stop? Opal repeated. Yes, Marshall finally admitted. And did you stop? Opal asked. Not until she signed, Marshall said. So you physically forced your 69-year-old mother to sign away her house while she begged you to stop, Opal summarized. I was trying to protect her, Marshall burst out. She's old, she doesn't understand finances, she needs someone to manage her property. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Mrs. Williams's bank statements showing she's managed her finances perfectly well for 40 years, Opal said, handing documents to the bailiff. She owns her home outright. She has retirement savings. She pays all her bills on time. She doesn't need anyone to manage her property. What she needs, Opal concluded, is protection from a son who sees her as a source of money and property to exploit. After testimony concluded, both lawyers gave closing arguments. Grover argued that Marshall was trying to help his aging mother, and that the transfer should stand with modifications to protect both parties. Opal argued that Marshall had committed elder abuse, forgery, and coercion, and that the deed should be voided entirely, with Marshall facing criminal prosecution. Finally, Judge Hayes spoke. I've heard enough, Judge Hayes said. This is one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse I've seen. Mr. Williams, you lived rent-free in your mother's house for 2 years. You pressured her repeatedly to transfer the property. When she refused, you forged her signature. When she discovered the forgery, you used physical force to coerce a new signature. Your testimony that you were helping your mother is contradicted by every piece of evidence, Judge Hayes continued. Your mother doesn't need help managing her property. She needs protection from you. I'm making the following rulings, Judge Hayes announced. First, the deed transfer is void. It was obtained through fraud and coercion and has no legal effect. The property remains in Mrs. Hattie Williams's name as sole owner. I felt tears of relief forming. Second, the restraining order is made permanent, Judge Hayes continued. Mr. Williams, you are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of your mother or her property. This order is permanent unless modified by future court order. Third, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, Judge Hayes said. Mr. Williams, you've committed multiple crimes, forgery, elder abuse, coercion, and possibly assault. Those are felonies. You should expect to face criminal charges. Fourth, Mrs. Williams, you're awarded attorney's fees, Judge Hayes concluded. Mr. Williams will be responsible for paying your legal costs in this matter. Your Honor, my client can't afford, Grover started. Then he shouldn't have stolen his mother's house, Judge Hayes interrupted sharply. These fees will be a judgment against him. If he doesn't pay voluntarily, Mrs. Williams can pursue collection. Judge Hayes looked directly at Marshall. Mr. Williams, your mother raised you alone after your father died. She worked hard to buy a house and give you a stable home. She supported you financially for 48 years, and you repaid her by trying to steal the house she worked her entire life to buy. You should be ashamed of yourself, Judge Hayes said with disgust. Case closed. The deed is void. The house belongs to Mrs. Williams. Mr. Williams, stay away from your mother or you'll be arrested. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Outside the courtroom, Opal and I stood in the hallway while Marshall and his lawyer walked away in the opposite direction. You won, Opal said, smiling. Your house is legally yours again. Thank you, I said, hugging her. Thank you for helping me fight back. You helped yourself, Opal corrected. You were brave enough to come to me, brave enough to testify, brave enough to hold your son accountable. What happens now? I asked. The county recorder's office will be notified that the deed transfer is void, Opal explained. The fraudulent deed will be removed from the records. Your original deed showing you as owner will be reinstated. And the criminal charges? I asked. The district attorney will review the case and decide whether to prosecute, Opal said. Given the evidence, forgery, coercion, elder abuse, I'd be surprised if they don't file charges. Will Marshall go to prison? I asked. Possibly, Opal said. Elder abuse and forgery are serious crimes. He could face several years if convicted. I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted Marshall to face consequences, but another part of me, the mother who'd loved him for 48 years, felt sad that it had come to this. It's okay to feel conflicted, Opal said gently, reading my expression. He's your son, you love him, but love doesn't mean accepting abuse. You did the right thing. 1 week after the court hearing, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Mrs. Williams, this is District Attorney Curtis Brown, the caller said. I'm calling about the criminal complaint you filed against your son Marshall Williams. Yes, I said nervously. We've reviewed the evidence and decided to file criminal charges, D.A. Brown said. Mr. Williams is being charged with elder abuse, forgery, and coercion. These are felony charges. He'll be arrested and arraigned within the next few days. Arrested, I repeated, the reality hitting me. Yes, ma'am, D.A. Brown confirmed. Is that a problem? You did file a criminal complaint. No, it's not a problem, I said. It's my son. I understand this is difficult, D.A. Brown said kindly. But Mrs. Williams, your son committed serious crimes against you. He needs to face accountability. I know, I said. Thank you for taking this seriously. 2 days later, Marshall was arrested at the motel where he'd been staying. He was booked, arraigned, and released on $10,000 bail that he somehow managed to pay. His trial was scheduled for 3 months later. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Should Marshall go to prison? Do you think he'll ever change? Where are you watching from? 3 months after Marshall's arrest, I sat in the courtroom for his criminal trial, my hands folded in my lap, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. Marshall sat at the defendant's table in a cheap suit, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. He was 48 years old, facing felony charges that could send him to prison for years. Part of me, the mother who'd raised him alone, who'd sacrificed everything for him, wanted to stand up and tell the court this was all a mistake, that Marshall was a good boy who'd just made bad choices. But I didn't, because Marshall wasn't a good boy who'd made bad choices. He was a 48-year-old man who'd spent his entire life taking advantage of people, especially his mother, and had finally escalated to outright theft and violence. And he needed to face the consequences. District Attorney Curtis Brown presented the prosecution's case with methodical precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, D.A. Brown began, this case is about a son who saw his elderly mother not as a person to love and respect, but as a resource to exploit. D.A. Brown laid out the timeline. Marshall's 48 years of taking money from me, living rent-free, never contributing. The 6 months of pressure to transfer the house. The forged documents, the physical coercion. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged quitclaim deeds, with signatures that didn't match mine. Photos of my bruised wrist. Medical records from the doctor I'd finally seen who documented the injuries. My testimony about Marshall gripping my wrist and forcing me to sign. Marshall's own admission in civil court that he'd helped steady my hand and didn't stop when I asked him to. Bank records showing I'd given Marshall over $15,000 over the years. Property records showing I'd owned the house for 40 years and paid it off completely. Marshall Williams didn't just steal his mother's house, D.A. Brown concluded. He stole her sense of safety, her trust, and her peace. These crimes deserve serious consequences. Marshall's public defender, Floyd Porter, argued that Marshall had acted out of genuine concern for his aging mother's welfare, and that his methods, while misguided, came from a place of love. The jury didn't buy it. After only 2 hours of deliberation, they returned with verdicts on all charges. Elder abuse causing bodily harm, guilty. Forgery in the first degree, guilty. Coercion, guilty. Attempted theft by deception, guilty. Marshall's face went white as each guilty was read. He looked at me desperately, as if I could somehow save him. But I just sat there, tears streaming down my face, knowing this was necessary. The sentencing hearing was smaller, quieter than the trial. Judge Thaddeus Carter, who'd presided over the criminal case, reviewed the pre-sentence report and the evidence. "Mr. Williams, you've been found guilty of multiple felonies against your own mother," Judge Carter began. "Before I impose sentence, is there anything you'd like to say?" Marshall stood, his lawyer beside him. "Your Honor, I'd like to address my mother," Marshall said. Judge Carter looked at me. "Mrs. Williams, do you consent to the defendant addressing you?" I hesitated, then nodded. Marshall turned to face me. "Mama, I'm sorry," Marshall said, his voice breaking. "I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't undo what I did. But I need you to know I'm finally seeing the truth." "For 48 years, you gave me everything," Marshall continued. "You worked multiple jobs to support us after Dad died. You bought a house so I'd have stability. You paid for my education, my cars, my failed businesses. You let me live with you rent-free whenever I needed. You gave me everything." "And I never once said thank you," Marshall said, tears forming. "I never appreciated your sacrifices. I just took and took and took, and when you finally tried to protect what little you had left, I tried to steal it." "I grabbed your wrist," Marshall admitted. "I forced you to sign papers while you cried and begged me to stop. I hurt you, my own mother, the woman who'd never hurt me." "I don't expect forgiveness," Marshall said. "I don't deserve it. I just want you to know you did the right thing, pressing charges, having me arrested, testifying against me. You did the right thing." "Because I needed to hit rock bottom," Marshall concluded. "I needed to lose everything to finally see what I'd become, a parasite, a thief, an abuser. I'm ashamed of the man I became." Marshall sat down, his face in his hands, crying. I sat there stunned. In 48 years, I'd never heard Marshall take genuine responsibility for anything. He'd always blamed others, made excuses, justified his behavior. This was the first time he'd ever truly acknowledged what he'd done. Judge Carter spoke. "Mr. Williams, your statement shows some self-awareness. However, self-awareness doesn't undo the harm you caused. Your mother is 69 years old. You stole her home, the home she worked 40 years to buy. You physically hurt her. You betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way. On the charge of elder abuse causing bodily harm, I sentence you to 3 years in state prison," Judge Carter announced. Marshall's shoulders slumped. "On the charge of forgery, I sentence you to 2 years, to run consecutively," Judge Carter continued. "On the charges of coercion and attempted theft, I sentence you to 1 year each, to run concurrently with the other sentences." "Total sentence, 5 years in state prison," Judge Carter concluded. "Additionally, you're ordered to pay full restitution to your mother for all legal fees and costs associated with both the civil and criminal cases, a total of $28,000. You'll also be prohibited from contacting your mother for the duration of your sentence, and 5 years after your release unless she initiates contact," Judge Carter added. 5 years. Marshall would be 53 when he was released. "Mrs. Williams, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" Judge Carter asked. I hadn't planned to, but suddenly I felt I needed to speak. I stood up and looked at Marshall. "For 48 years, I loved you more than anything in the world," I said, my voice steady despite my tears. "I worked 3 jobs so you could have a good life. I went without so you could have. I sacrificed my dreams so you could pursue yours. I thought I was being a good mother," I continued. "But I realize now I was being an enabling mother. I gave you everything without teaching you to appreciate anything. I rescued you from every consequence without teaching you responsibility. When you tried to steal my house, I finally stopped enabling you," I said. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally loved myself enough to protect myself from you. Pressing charges was the hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted. But it was also the most necessary thing, because you needed consequences, real consequences, not just me being disappointed or upset, real accountability. I hope these 5 years teach you what 48 years of my love couldn't teach you, I concluded. How to take responsibility, how to appreciate what you have, how to treat people with respect instead of seeing them as resources to exploit. I still love you, I said. You're my son, I'll always love you, but I won't sacrifice myself for you anymore. I won't enable you anymore. I won't accept abuse anymore. I've reclaimed my peace, I finished, and I hope someday you find yours. I sat down, exhausted but feeling lighter than I had in years. Outside the courtroom, Opal put her arm around my shoulders. How are you feeling? Opal asked. Free, I said simply. For the first time in 48 years, I feel completely free. You should, Opal said. You stood up to your abuser, you held him accountable. You reclaimed your home and your peace. That takes incredible strength. I keep thinking about what Marshall said, I admitted. About finally seeing the truth. Do you think his remorse is real? Maybe, Opal said. 5 years in prison can change a person, or it can just make them bitter. Time will tell. But Hattie, whether Marshall changes or not isn't your responsibility anymore. Your responsibility now is to yourself, to live the peaceful life you've earned. 6 months into Marshall's prison sentence, I received a letter from him. I'd received 3 letters so far, all similar, apologetic, reflective, taking responsibility. This 4th letter was different. Dear Mama, I'm writing from prison. I've been here for 6 months now, with 4.5 years to go. I've been attending every program available, substance abuse counseling. Even though I don't have addiction issues, the counselor says the tools apply to any compulsive behavior: anger management, life skills, financial literacy. The financial literacy class has been eye-opening. We learned about budgeting, saving, managing money responsibly. And I realized you did all these things perfectly for 40 years. You budgeted carefully. You saved. You paid off your house. You managed your money better than most people. And I told myself you didn't know what you were doing, that you needed me to manage your property. What arrogance. What delusion. You knew exactly what you were doing. You always did. I was the one who was financially incompetent. I was the one who couldn't keep a job, couldn't save money, couldn't manage my life. But instead of admitting my failures, I tried to take what you'd built through your competence. Mama, I've done a lot of thinking about why I became the person I became. The counselor here says I have what's called entitlement mentality. I believed the world owed me success without effort, that you owed me support without reciprocation, that I deserved your house simply because I was your son. I don't know where that mentality came from. Maybe because you gave me so much that I started taking it for granted. Maybe because I never had to face real consequences until now. Maybe because I'm just selfish. But I'm trying to change. Every day in here, I'm working on becoming someone different. Someone who takes responsibility. Someone who appreciates what he has instead of always wanting more. Someone who treats people with respect instead of seeing them as resources. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or for you to visit or to reduce my sentence. I'm writing to tell you, thank you. Thank you for finally stopping the cycle of enabling. Thank you for holding me accountable. Thank you for loving yourself enough to protect yourself from me. That night when you signed those papers, not the papers I forced you to sign, but the legal papers you signed with your lawyer to take everything back, that was the night you saved both our lives. You saved yours by reclaiming your peace, and you saved mine by forcing me to finally face what I'd become. I love you, Mama, and I'm sorry for everything. Your son, Marshall. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Was Marshall's change genuine? Would it last beyond his prison sentence? I didn't know, but I hoped so. 1 year after Marshall went to prison, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I visited him. I'd ignored his requests to visit for a year. But his letters had been so consistent, so genuinely remorseful, that I finally decided to see him face to face. The prison visiting room was stark. Metal tables, plastic chairs, guards watching from the perimeter. Marshall was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He'd lost weight, looked healthier somehow. His eyes, when they met mine, held something I'd rarely seen in adult Marshall, genuine humility. "Hi, Mama," Marshall said quietly, sitting down across from me. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I understand," Marshall said. "You don't owe me visits, you don't owe me anything." We sat in awkward silence for a moment. "How are you?" I finally asked. "I'm okay," Marshall said. "Prison is hard, but I'm managing. I've been working in the prison library, taking every class available, reading a lot, thinking a lot." "About what?" I asked. "About my life," Marshall said. "About all the ways I failed, all the people I hurt, especially you." "Marshall, I've been thinking too," I said. "About my role in how you turned out. I enabled you. I gave you too much without teaching you to earn. I rescued you from consequences that could have taught you responsibility." "Mama, don't," Marshall said firmly. "Don't take responsibility for my choices. Yes, you gave me a lot, but plenty of people have generous parents and don't turn into thieves and abusers. I made choices, bad choices. That's on me, not you." "You were a wonderful mother," Marshall continued. "You worked so hard to give me a good life after Dad died. You sacrificed everything. The problem wasn't what you gave me, it was how I received it, with entitlement instead of gratitude." "I'm trying to change that now," Marshall said. "I'm trying to become someone who appreciates what he has instead of always wanting more." "How's that going?" I asked. "It's hard," Marshall admitted. 50 years of thinking one way doesn't change overnight, but I'm working on it, every day." We talked for an hour. Marshall told me about his classes, his goals for when he was released, his plans to get a real job and support himself. "I know I can't have a relationship with you right now," Marshall said. "I understand that, but Mama, when I get out, if you're willing, I'd like to try. A different relationship. One where I'm a respectful adult son, not a parasite." "We'll see," I said carefully. "For more years is a long time. Let's see who you are when you're released." "That's fair," Marshall said. As our visit ended, and guards came to take Marshall back to his cell, he said one more thing. "Mama, I'm glad you took your house back. I'm glad you pressed charges. I'm glad you finally stopped enabling me. Because that's what real love looks like, not giving people everything they want, but holding them accountable so they can become who they need to be." 3 years after Marshall went to prison, I'd built a life more peaceful and fulfilling than any I'd had in 48 years. I'd renovated my house, legally and permanently mine, with new paint, updated kitchen, beautiful garden. I'd reconnected with old friends and made new ones through a church group and community center classes. I'd started a small support group for other elderly people whose adult children had financially exploited them. Sharing my story helped others find courage to set boundaries and protect themselves. I'd even started dadding, a kind widower named Luther from my church who treated me with respect and never asked me for anything. My life was full, peaceful, mine. Marshall still wrote me letters from prison. The letters continued to show growth, self-awareness, genuine remorse. But I'd learned something important. My peace didn't depend on Marshall's transformation. Whether Marshall changed or not, I was free. I'd reclaimed my house, my finances, my autonomy, and most importantly, my peace. 4 years after Marshall went to prison, he'd gotten 1 year off for good behavior. I received notification that he was being released. The terms of his release included 5 years of supervised probation, prohibition from contacting me unless I initiated contact, requirement to maintain employment, requirement to attend ongoing counseling, payment plan for the $28,000 restitution he owed me. 2 weeks after his release, Marshall's probation officer called me. "Mrs. Williams, this is Officer Geneva Stone. I'm supervising your son Marshall's probation. I wanted to let you know he's been released and is complying with all conditions." "How is he doing?" I asked. "Very well, actually," Officer Stone said. "He's already secured employment at a furniture warehouse. He's attending counseling twice a week. He's living in a halfway house and following all rules. He seems genuinely committed to rebuilding his life." "That's good to hear," I said. "He's asked multiple times if he can contact you," Officer Stone said. "I've told him no, that the court order prohibits contact unless you initiate, but I wanted you to know he's asked." "Thank you for letting me know," I said. I thought about it for a week. Did I want contact with Marshall? Did I want to risk the peace I'd built? Finally, I decided to send one letter, just one, to see how he responded. "Dear Marshall, I've been informed you've been released from prison and are doing well on probation. I'm glad to hear that. I want you to know I'm doing well too. My house is beautiful. I've renovated and made it truly mine. I have friends, hobbies, a full life. I'm happy and at peace. I've thought a lot about whether to contact you, about whether you've truly changed or if this is temporary good behavior. I don't know the answer. Only time will tell. But I'm willing to try limited contact. If you'd like, we can meet for coffee, 1 hour, in a public place, to talk. This doesn't mean I'm welcoming you back into my life fully. It doesn't mean I'm offering you money or a place to stay. It means I'm willing to see if we can have a different kind of relationship, one between independent adults who respect each other. The choice is yours. Your mother, Hattie." 2 weeks later, I sat in a cafe waiting for Marshall. He arrived exactly on time, something the old Marshall would never have done, wearing clean but inexpensive clothes and carrying nothing but a small notebook. "Hi, Mama," Marshall said, sitting down carefully. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You're welcome," I said. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a moment. "You look good," Marshall observed. "Healthy, happy." "I am happy," I confirmed. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," Marshall said. "Working full-time at a furniture warehouse, making $18 an hour. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work and I'm grateful for it." "That's good," I said. "I'm living in a halfway house," Marshall continued. "Paying $400 a month for a small room, budgeting carefully, saving what I can, and paying you back $100 a month toward the $28,000 I owe you." "You don't have to pay me back so quickly," I said. "Yes, I do," Marshall said firmly. "I owe you that money, more than that money, actually, but this is a start." We talked for an hour. Marshall told me about his job, his goals, his counseling. "The counselor has helped me understand something," Marshall said. "For 48 years, I saw you as existing to serve me, to give me things, to make my life easier. I never saw you as a person with your own needs and dreams." "I see that now," Marshall continued. "And I'm ashamed. You had dreams, Mama. You wanted to travel, to take art classes, to have friendships. But you gave all that up to support me, and I never appreciated it." "I've had time to pursue those things now," I said. "I've taken painting classes, I've traveled some, I have good friends." "I'm glad," Marshall said genuinely. "You deserve that. You deserve a life of your own." As our coffee meeting ended, Marshall asked carefully, "Can we do this again? Maybe once a month, just coffee, no expectations." "We can try," I said. "But Marshall, I need you to understand. Our relationship will never be what it was. I won't support you financially. I won't let you live with me. I won't sacrifice myself for you." "I understand," Marshall said. "And I don't want that old relationship back. That relationship was toxic. I want a new relationship, one where we're both independent adults who respect each other." "Then we can try," I said. 1 year after Marshall's release from prison, 5 years after he'd stolen my house by force, I sat in my beautiful, peaceful home reflecting on how much had changed. My house was fully mine, legally, permanently, undisputedly. Marshall and I had coffee once a month. The relationship was careful, bounded, but slowly healing. He'd been paying me back $100 a month faithfully. He'd kept his job. He'd moved out of the halfway house into his own small apartment. More importantly, Marshall had maintained his changed behavior. No requests for money, no demands for help, no entitlement, just respectful adult conversation between two independent people. "I'm proud of you," I told Marshall during one coffee meeting. Marshall's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mama. That means everything." "I'm proud of me too," I added, "for finally standing up for myself, for reclaiming my house and my peace." "You should be," Marshall said. "What you did, having me arrested, pressing charges, testifying against me, that took incredible courage." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. "But it was also the most loving thing you've ever done," Marshall said, "because it forced me to change. If you'd enabled me one more time, I'd probably still be the same entitled, abusive person. But you loved me enough to let me face consequences." That evening, I sat on my renovated porch watching the sunset, a cup of tea in my hand, my beautiful garden blooming around me. I thought about that terrible day 5 years ago when Marshall had grabbed my wrist and forced me to sign away my house. I thought about that evening when I'd called Opal and signed papers to take everything back. I thought about the court hearings, the trial, the sentencing. I thought about 5 years of rebuilding, my house, my life, my peace. And I realized I'd won. Not just in court, not just in getting my house back, but in reclaiming myself. For 48 years, I'd been Marshall's mother, defined entirely by my relationship to my son, by how much I could sacrifice, by how much I could give. But now I was Hattie Williams, a 74-year-old woman with her own home, her own friends, her own interests, her own peace. My son had stolen my house by force. That evening, I'd signed one paper and taken everything back. But what I'd really taken back wasn't just the house. I'd taken back my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live without fear or exploitation. I'd reclaimed my peace. And that peace, sitting on my porch in my house, living my life on my own terms, was worth more than any property deed. Marshall had tried to steal my house. But I'd taken back something far more valuable, myself. What an incredible transformation. Marshall served 4 years in prison, got 1 year off for good behavior. Hattie's house is 100% hers again, legally, permanently, undisputedly. Marshall was released and is actually changed, working at a warehouse for $18 an hour, living in his own apartment, paying Hattie back $100 a month toward the $28,000 he owes. They have coffee once a month, a new relationship based on mutual respect, not enabling. Marshall said, "Having me arrested was the most loving thing you ever did because it forced me to change." Hattie is thriving at 74, renovated her house, has friends, took painting classes, traveled, even dating Luther. She said, "I didn't just take back my house, I took back myself." This story proves that it's never too late to stand up to abuse. Enabling doesn't help, accountability does. Real love demands consequences, not endless sacrifice. You can reclaim your peace at any age. Forgery and elder abuse are CRIMES deserving prison. You are more than someone's parent, you're a person. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications for new content. Drop a comment. What part of Hattie's journey inspired you most? Do you believe Marshall's change is permanent? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, Trinidad, India, Philippines? Let me know. Remember, if an adult child is exploiting you financially, living off you without contributing, or trying to steal your property, fight back. Contact a lawyer, file charges if necessary. You are not obligated to sacrifice yourself forever. Real love holds people accountable. Enabling is not love, it's harm disguised as kindness. Hattie's son stole her house by force. That evening, she signed one paper with a lawyer and took everything back. 5 years later, her house is hers, Marshall is paying restitution, and Hattie has complete peace. May this story inspire you to never let anyone, even family, steal what you've worked your whole life to build. Thank you for following this powerful journey from theft to justice, from enabling to accountability, from victimhood to complete peace. Until the next story, stay strong, protect your assets, and remember that holding people accountable is the truest form of love.